Stoicism was born in the squares of Athens, amidst marble columns and voices searching for meaning. Of all the teachings that have survived the test of time, few are as timely as this. A free man is not one who does what he wants, but one who masters what he feels. This is the essence of Stoicism, the art of living in peace amidst chaos. Marcus Aurelius, an emperor besieged by wars, wrote in his diary that the most dangerous enemy is not outside, but within us. Epictetus, a former slave, said that no one can harm us unless we consent internally. Seneca reminded us that life is not short. It is we who waste it on what does not matter. These ancient men taught what the gospel would later confirm. True freedom is born from within. Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." The Stoics' reason prepares the ground. Faith in Christ plants the seed that blossoms in peace. If this union of wisdom and faith touches something within you, sign up and walk with us. Here each week we forge a new path together between the mastery of the mind and the stillness of the soul. Nathan, a 40-year-old literature professor, knew words well but not silence. He spent his days surrounded by students, noise, and expectations. On the outside, he seemed calm. Inside, he struggled with suppressed anger, silent comparisons, and a constant sense of spiritual failure. One night, grading piles of papers, he felt a strange emptiness, the kind of silence that speaks louder than any noise. He closed his eyes and remembered a quote he had read days before. "Life is what thoughts make of it." Marcus Aurelius. The quote kept spinning in his mind until he realized how much his thoughts had been shaping his own pain. Nathan wondered if it was possible to combine this ancient wisdom with his faith. He picked up the Bible that lay on the table and read, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." Proverbs 23:7. For the first time, he understood that the mind is the spirit's first battlefield. Stoicism would teach him to fight. Faith, to surrender at the end of the battle. He decided to start. No big promises, just an inner cleansing. 12 habits, one at a time. The first was learning to control anger. Seneca said that nothing makes us more like wild beasts than losing control. The Bible echoes, "A man slow to anger is better than a man of strength." Proverbs 16:32. Nathan began to realize that anger is a mirror of fear. And when he learned to pause before reacting, he discovered that silence is more powerful than shouting. The second habit was to let go of comparisons. Social media was his measure of success, until he realized the absurdity of it. Epictetus reminded him that we should only worry about what is within our control. Paul in Galatians 6 said, "Let each one examine his own work." He closed his phone and began to be grateful for what he had, instead of beating himself up for what he lacked. Then he stopped justifying his failures to those who had hurt him. Epictetus taught that there is no wisdom in trying to prove one's worth. Jesus, faced with his accusers, remained silent. Nathan understood that the need for explanation is merely disguised pride. Truth does not need to defend itself. And slowly something began to change. Not the world around him, but the rhythm within him. His thoughts, once chaotic, began to become orderly. His anxiety, once constant, began to recede. It wasn't perfection, it was progress. And silent progress is the most solid of all. On a rainy afternoon, as he watched students leave school, Nathan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Lightness. Not because his problems had disappeared, but because he had stopped fighting the inevitable. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul is colored by the hues of its thoughts. Nathan realized that for the first time he was painting his life with the right colors: serenity, discipline, faith. Stoicism showed him the path of reason. Christ taught him the path of grace. And between the two, something new was born, the peace the world cannot give. Nathan thought he was winning. Each week he practiced a new habit, a new way of disciplining himself. He had learned to keep quiet when he used to explode, to not respond to provocations, to avoid comparisons. But inside him, something still troubled him. A voice that said, "You control everything, but you still trust nothing." It was at that point that he realized, Controlling your mind is one thing, surrendering your heart is another. Stoicism had taught him to endure, but faith invited him to rest. And there was a chasm between these two attitudes. He wanted to master the pain. God wanted him to surrender it. This was the conflict that kept him from finding complete peace. Nathan understood mastery, but not surrender. One night, after a tense day at school, he received a message from an old classmate. Harsh words, old accusations resurfaced. He felt the old impulses rise: anger, defensiveness, pride. He remembered Epictetus. It is not what happens that hurts us, but the opinion we have about it. He took a deep breath and silently replied simply, "May God bless you." He closed the phone, but his heart still trembled. He realized that external silence is easy. Internal silence is not. That night he prayed, not a memorized prayer, but a sincere request. "Lord, teach me to be calm inside, not just outside." He remembered the words of Philippians 4. "The peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and minds." He realized that God doesn't promise an absence of conflict, but a constant presence in the midst of it. Serenity isn't the end of the storm, it's trusting while it rages. In the following days, he faced the second test: comparison. A former student of his had published a book and was receiving praise in the city. Nathan felt the old pang of ego. He remembered Galatians 6:4, "Examine your own work and then you will have reason to boast in yourself." He closed the newspaper and picked up the notebook where he wrote his thoughts. He wrote a simple sentence: "My calling is not to conquer the other, but to conquer my yesterday." That sentence became a prayer, and prayer became a habit. The third test came in the form of fatigue. Nathan began to put off what needed to be done: correcting, planning, praying. Procrastination came disguised as rest. Seneca was right. While we hesitate, life passes by. James 2. You do not know what will happen tomorrow. Nathan realized that later is the greatest thief of the soul, and that faith is also about taking action, not when everything is ready, but when God asks. One Sunday morning, sitting in the church pew, he heard the pastor say something that struck a chord in him. "Discipline gets you halfway, faith carries you all the way." He smiled. That was it. Stoicism had taught him to master his mind, but faith was teaching him to surrender control. The two didn't contradict each other, they complemented each other. On the way home, the sun beat down on the car window, and he thought about how he'd spent years trying to earn peace. Now he understood. Peace isn't earned, it's received. The mind can build walls. The heart, when it trusts, opens doors. And in that moment, he chose to open. Silently, Nathan began writing down 3 practical commitments that would become his spiritual and mental routine. First, observe before you react, because mastery begins with thought. Second, act before you feel ready, because delay kills more dreams than failure. Third, surrender before understanding, because faith is trusting even without explanations. These 3 steps became his daily foundation. He realized that true balance isn't about always being strong, but about learning when to fight and when to rest. Stoicism taught him to resist chaos. Christ taught him to rest in it. The next few weeks would be more intense. The old Nathan would resist, trying to prove he could control everything. The new Nathan would learn that there is strength in kneeling. And it is in this clash, between mastery and surrender, that the soul finally finds peace. Nathan realized that real transformation doesn't happen when everything changes on the outside, but when you stop running away from what God is asking of you on the inside. Days after the last conflict, the school organized a pedagogical meeting. The topic quickly veered off topic. Classmates began talking about an absent teacher, making assumptions and laughing easily. Nathan felt the old urge to participate, that desire to fit in through sarcasm. But then he remembered his chosen path. He took a breath, gently changed the subject, and returned to the lesson plan. His silence cut through the air without humiliating anyone. He didn't win applause, he won peace. There, he understood that mastering the language is a way to master the soul. That same week, management announced that the schedule would change and that there would be extra deliverables. The perfectionist within him stirred. Everything had to be flawless, every comma perfect, every deadline anticipated. But perfection had always exacted a heavy price: sleepless nights and a tense heart. Instead of redoing everything 3 times, he devised a simple, workable plan with real rest breaks. He remembered what he had learned. The goal isn't to appear invincible, it's to remain faithful. He finished the essentials, revised carefully, and delivered. Without over-the-top brilliance, without guilt. He discovered that quiet excellence is the sister of humility. The hardest test came in an empty classroom. A student left a note. "Teacher, I can't stop comparing myself. I don't think I'll ever be enough." Nathan recognized the shaky handwriting of her own adolescence on that paper. She sat with the boy after class. He didn't promise instant victory. He spoke about training our eyes to see what depends on us, about closing the windows that feed envy and opening the doors that require courage. He said the mind can be educated and the heart can learn to rest. Without naming names, he spoke of Seneca and an apostle who learned to be content in any and every situation. Then he did something he would have ignored months earlier. He prayed with the student, asking for wisdom and a steadfast spirit. That encounter taught Nathan that the transformation God gives us isn't private. When it's genuine, it overflows. Procrastination tried to sneak back in. It was Friday night and he had a project to finish. The sweet voice of "do it tomorrow" appeared with a list of plausible excuses. Nathan got up, washed his face, and sat back down. He chose the smallest part and did it. Then the next. In 90 minutes, what had seemed like a monster was just a series of steps. He closed his laptop before midnight, looked out the window, and gave thanks. Discipline didn't steal his freedom, it gave it back. Unrealistic expectations, in turn, continued to whisper, the perfect life, the perfect class, the perfect faith. A rainy Sunday brought the answer. At church, he heard a reading that spoke of peace that surpasses understanding. It's not peace when everything goes right, it's peace when you choose to trust. Walking home, he accepted that reality doesn't need to be polished to be sacred. Grace doesn't depend on the setting, it sanctifies it. As the weeks passed, the 12 habits ceased to be a checklist and became a way of inhabiting his own life. He stopped explaining himself to those who hurt him, not out of pride, but out of freedom. He buried goals that no longer served him, not out of giving up, but out of clarity. He shielded his heart from the stage of social media and the amphitheater of other people's judgment. He cut out comparisons, curbed his tongue, trained his mind, and rested in God. None of this immediately transformed the world around him. It transformed the place from which he experienced the world. One quiet morning, he entered the classroom early and remained silent for a few minutes before the students arrived. There was no music, no notifications, only the sound of light rain on the roof. He thought of Marcus Aurelius thanking him for waking up and being able to work for the common good. He thought of Jesus' invitation to learn from him, who is meek and humble of heart. He understood that calm is not the absence of battle, it is learning to fight on your knees and walk on your feet. He would still face challenges, deadlines, and expectations. But now he knew the way back. Observe before reacting, act before being ready, surrender before understanding. He had discovered that freedom begins when you educate your mind and develop trust. Stoicism taught him to steer the helm. Faith showed him who steers the wind. If you've made it this far, do something that will change the course of your day. For the next 24 hours, choose one of the 12 habits and practice it without warning, without ostentation. If your struggle is anger, decide on a calm response to the next provocation. If it's comparison, turn off the internet for a day and write 3 lines of concrete gratitude. If it's procrastination, break the task down into 3 steps and do the first one now. Finish by reserving 10 minutes of stillness to realign your mind with truth and your heart with God. If these words struck you at just the right moment, walk with us. Sign up and join this community that trains the mind with ancient wisdom and strengthens the heart with living faith. Here, we don't run alone. Every week, one more step. Every week, fewer chains. And leave a simple and honest answer in the comments. What habit will you practice today? And what freedom are you seeking? Your public commitment can be the first building block of your new journey. Don't promise perfection. Promise presence. The rest, discipline builds and grace completes.